Not all clients are the same. So why are you prescribing the same shoulder rehab exercises? In a few seconds, I'm going to tell you about the strategy that's proven to be most effective at restoring pain-free shoulder function. It's not the conventional rehab journey, but it's literally the best. But first, let me tell you why this strategy and what it's all about. 20 years ago, when I started as an athletic therapist, I quickly realized that the conventional clinical setting was incomplete. Manual therapy and exercises alone don't build tolerance, don't create adaptation. I wasn't addressing scapular function, I wasn't addressing breathing, thoracic mobility, and all the many other elements that go into restoring shoulder function. So throughout the years, I developed a proven framework that bridges the gap from injured to strong effectively and consistently. And then it came to me. The results were so life-changing, I couldn't keep them for my own clients, I had to share them. This is why I'm hosting a free webinar where I go through detailed case studies of exactly how I fix my clients' shoulder problems with practical tools so that you can help your clients right away. Make sure to click the link below to register. Today, more than 2,000 trainers and therapists apply this strategy, and the results speak for themselves. But first, let me tell you about the strategy. So what is this strategy? The first sequence is mobilization. The objective of the mobilization sequence is to create space. So we're addressing any factors that can limit movement. So it could be addressing soft tissue limitations, downregulating muscles that are facilitated, addressing articular restrictions, working on proprioception, joint dissociation, and even addressing autonomic tone like breathing. Okay? So in Andre-Felix's case, he's got some directional instability. So he's got in his right shoulder a directional instability in the anterior direction. So the result of a joint moving more readily in a certain direction means that it becomes a direction of susceptible movement. So he's going to have that slight micro-instability in the front of the shoulder. Now we also noticed that he had an articular restriction in the inferior direction. So although it sounds strange to do mobilization with someone who has hypermobility, in his case we want all the room we need for the shoulder to centrate properly. So one self-mobilization exercise we'll give him to address that articular restriction is the inferior glide exercise, which he'll do simply on a box or bench or some kind of a hard surface. Now he makes a fist and ensures that he's got full elbow extension, and he's going to push the fist down into the bench or box. So as he pushes that down, it creates a muscular lever that glides the head of the humerus inferiorly. And he pushes and relaxes and pushes and relaxes to create that oscillatory movement and that little joint mobilization in an inferior glide. Now, hopefully that makes sense for you so far, and maybe you've even already learned something that is going to help you. Now, let me tell you about the activation sequence, the next sequence. The activation sequence is about creating awareness. So we're going to engage the client to move in a very specific and deliberate way to make the connections that form the elements of a movement. Okay, so this can be upregulating now muscles that are inhibited. It can be working on the capacity to recruit and contract very specific muscles. Okay, so in the activation sequence for Andre, I'm going to show you a couple of exercises that we did. So the rotator cuff obviously is going to be an important aspect for Andre-Felix's anterior hypermobility, namely the subscapularis. And that's what's important about rotator cuff muscles, is finding the right one that we need to activate using an isolated exercise. So to isolate the subscapularis, we're going to use a band internal rotation. So we're going to have palm open. He uses this hand to make sure that his shoulder doesn't dump forward as he does his internal rotation. And he's going to hold that internal rotation for 10 seconds. We're going to use repeated isometric holds 5 times 10 seconds because isometrics are great for activation versus concentric eccentric contractions. They create a lot more muscle activation, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to reactivate that subscapularis so it can do its job properly, namely to stabilize the glenohumeral joint in the anterior direction. So another thing that we want to work on is the scapulothoracic muscles. So we need the scapulothoracic muscles to fire optimally to keep the head of the humerus centrated. So the reach, roll, and lift, he's going to reach with the fingers, make sure he gets full elbow extension, making sure he doesn't shrug, and then when he rolls, that brings the scapula into a slight retraction, sticks to the rib cage, and then he lifts or he tries to lift, and he wants to make sure he maintains that elbow extension and doesn't shrug. So if he needs to not lift but just have the intention to lift, then that's okay. Now, by the way, guys, I cover all this in much more detail in my free webinar. Make sure you click the link below to register. You don't want to miss it. And we're not done yet. This third sequence of the movement optimization strategy is integration. Integration is about creating behavior. So here we're identifying loads, positions, and postures that we are able to use to impose load. We're identifying behaviors that we want to control or modify or improve. We're working on improving intermuscular coordination, so the capacity of muscles to work together to create the movement. So we're engaging the client to apply intentional force in very specific directions. Now, the landmine press is a really good choice for Andre because it will get the scapula to move up and around the rib cage. Now, we're actually going to limit the range of motion here. He's going to stop just short of end range because that bottom range is where the head of the humerus wants to glide anteriorly. So we don't want him to have pain. We're limiting that range of motion. He's also using a super slow eccentric because eccentrics are really great for neuromuscular control. So they require more voluntary control, and they're great for him to understand and take the time to maintain that positioning. I hope with these 4 exercises you're already getting an understanding. The conventional way of addressing common shoulder dysfunctions is fundamentally incomplete. If you want to learn more, I'd like to invite you to my free webinar where I cover my full strategy through more real-life case studies. We will go through John's shoulder problem in detail, the assessment, building the 12-week program, and of course, the results. John's shoulder pain had an uncommon fix, and the traditional approach couldn't fix it. Surprisingly, that's often the case. With this strategy, you'll be able to help your clients by building effective interventions for the shoulder. More importantly, you will understand the underlying principles, strategy, and mindset so that you never have that "I don't know what to do with this client" feeling again. And at the end of the webinar, I will take time to answer your questions. If you're like me, you always want to perfect your craft, equip yourself with the best knowledge to help your clients, then this webinar is perfect for you. It exposes a strategy that has helped thousands of trainers and therapists build better interventions. For example, Kate said she never saw training clients that were in pain the same way. She felt more confident answering their questions, and after implementing the strategy, she found the progress was exponential. Max also applied the strategy. He said after discovering it, he was able to help his dad out of pain immediately. In his words, "This shit works." I won't drag on, but there's just so much evidence. Is it your turn now to take your practice to the next level? You may never see this ad again, and there are only 500 spots available. Last time, hundreds of registrations came in every day. But if you're still watching this video, that means 2 things. You're clearly dedicated to helping your clients, and you're anxious to know more, and there are only a few spots left. So grab your seat now. Click the link below and choose a time and date that fits your calendar. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the webinar. I'm anxious to share John's case study and my strategy.